You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike. Welcome into the Psych with Mike library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan, and I am here with Mr. Brett Newcomb.
Good morning.
I guess I've been slow to start.
Turgid.
Yeah. Because you've been chastising me.
I've been patient.
We had a good conversation going, and then
I discovered you weren't taping
in the middle of it. Said, "Are we taping this?
Yeah, why are we wasting the good stuff?"
Yeah, we were wasting
idle
it.
chatter.
Yeah, you don't want to shoot your load. I can't say that.
Go ahead and say that.
No, I can't say that.
That's awfully good and professional.
I can't say that. What's the matter
You're
with me?
You're a sick man.
I can't say that. So I apologize. That was not.
It's very adolescent of you.
Yeah. Well, I felt like that the conversation was devolving that way.
You think a lot of our conversations are adolescent?
And
I would have to agree with that.
So I'm glad.
I always try to speak on the level of my audience.
So when you're with me,
yeah, there you go.
I got you. Well, actually, that is kind of apropos for the subject matter, talking about adolescent behavior.
Yeah, or immature behavior more than adolescent, because I don't think it's a time frame reference. What you want to talk about today? I think it's a maturity, a self-control, a discipline, thinking. Actions as opposed to emotional reactions.
I also think that it's a sign of the times.
Well, yeah, but so what we want to talk about today is there was a news piece that came out in the St. Louis area where two mothers driving their elementary children to school in the drop-off lane got into what the French would call a contretemps with one another about
their friend. I don't think their friends can
French.
Oh,
sorry, was I not enunciating? So one mother cut the other off, and it got into a honking and fussing thing. And so the one mother who did the cutting off got out of her car and walked over to the other lady to apologize. Said, "I'm sorry, it was an accident. I was inattentive." And the woman in the car pulled a gun out and pointed at her. And then the woman who was standing there said, "Well, I got one for you too." And she went back to her car and got a gun and came back, and they were pointing guns at each other in the parking lot. And then apparently they left. But it made the news, and part of what you wanted to discuss is what in the world causes people to behave like this in this day and age, and especially with grade school age children. Well, I mean, what are you modeling as a parent if that's how you behave?
Right. And I want to say unequivocally, I don't know who these women are. I don't know who else was involved in this situation. But if anybody had ever been involved in this situation and ever wondered to themselves, am I a good parent? The answer is no.
So one of the challenges of being a parent is to teach your child how to behave in various circumstances.
And to not traumatize them.
While you're doing that?
Yeah.
Yeah. But to model for them the appropriate management of frustration and anger. We all get frustrated. We all get angry. Anger is original issue equipment. You were born being able to be angry.
Glad man said
You
it's
see a little 6-month-old baby or 1-year-old baby that can't have something that they want. They don't have the words yet to articulate themselves. So they'll bite you. They get mad at you and they bite you. And you have to teach them, don't bite, And so there are all kinds of discussions about how do you teach a 1-year-old not to bite. Or they'll slap you, or they'll scream and yell and be incoherent. And so part of the challenge of being a good parent is to teach your child the appropriate way to contain and express negative emotions, emotions that are generally perceived to be bad by observers. But they're emotions we all have, we all feel. If you've ever been driving a car and had a flood of road rage, the challenge is, how do I handle this without killing myself or somebody else or hurting them? And I mean, if you drive them off the road and they die, then you can spend the rest of your life in prison. all for a momentary loss of control.
And this is going to be a different conversation that we're going to have about creativity and things like that. But I put that into the bucket of self-soothing. And so when you're talking about this original equipment that we've all been given, that equipment, a part of what being a parent is how to teach individuals to deal with this original equipment that we've been imbued with, a part of which are our emotions. So the 4 primary emotions, glad, mad, sad, and scared, we all have those. It's biologically impossible to be a human being and not have those emotions. And a part of what being a parent is how to help your child identify those emotions and deal with them appropriately. And grabbing your gun is not the appropriate reaction in that situation.
And I would say if you don't have a gun, you can't grab a gun. So having a handgun,
right,
to me, is a discussion for another day.
Yeah.
But I would say the same thing if you want to punch somebody. I mean, you ever had the urge to just...
Sure.
I taught school for 20 years, high school.
Mm-hmm.
I taught university for 30 years. When I used to give speeches around the country, the parent groups, one of the things that I would often say to parents is, have you ever just encountered a kid you wanted to slap?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't know them, you don't know what's going on, but you just get this visceral desire to slap them. And people laugh and they respond with shock and disdain. It's like, oh, you know, how can you say that? Well, I think people do have those feelings. I think there are things that just touch hidden buttons in you that cause you to flood with the negative feelings. And if you could indulge all those feelings, you'd slap the crap out of somebody. For all your own reasons, for all your own stuff that's triggering inside you. And maybe because they also deliberately try to promote that. They try to dress in ways that are going to cause you to be upset or be provocative and make statements about who they are by how they present themselves. And who they are is a direct challenge to what you are.
And what allows you to not do that,
fear of consequences,
is called self-soothing.
Self-discipline.
Well, I mean, we can use different language, but ultimately...
But we can't use different language when we do sad, mad, glad, and scared? Because we have this conversation all the time. I don't agree with you.
Okay. I mean,
but I mean, I just think it's more nuanced than you want to reduce it to the minimalist.
I reduce it to the ways in which that the body can change hormonally. And then there are a million different shades of those things and combinations, but there's 4 ways in which the human body can change as a result of the hormones that are deposited into it. Okay.
That's a gentler explanation and a more hearable, for me, explanation.
Yeah.
So I won't challenge that right now.
Yeah. So, but ultimately, this idea of self-soothing is a part of what I think goes into being a good parent, helping your child to be able to acknowledge their own emotional reality and to be able to deal with that in a way that is not only appropriate, but might actually be beneficial to them and to their ability to be in communion with other human beings.
Well, you know that it is. I mean, as therapists, one of the things that we have done through the years, and I don't know if people are aware, have access to check it out, but we had a regular typing page poster of 40 cartoon-drawn facial expressions with labels on them. And we give them to parents that were struggling with parenting their children, teaching their kids developmental different ages, these concerns. And we say, put this on the refrigerator. And then every time you're engaged in one of these situations, ask the child, look at this and tell me which one you see. What do you see on your sister's face? What do you see on my face right now? Which one of these am I? So that they learn to identify and recognize and label.
Right.
Labeling is a critical ingredient. You've got to be able to label it. And so if I look at you and I think you're happy and I misbehave and all of a sudden you're not happy, is there a way I can tell the difference that doesn't involve your lashing out at me?
And labeling it, I think, is an essential part of that process, because I believe, and the reason why I want to boil things down to those 4 primary emotions, glad, mad, sad, and scared, is because I want to help people to identify and attach those labels, because I think that's where the process begins to go wrong, is that a lot of us say that we're mad when we're really hurt, when we're really sad. If you reject me, why would I ever be mad at you? There's no reason. There's no biological evolutionary reason for that. I'm not mad. I'm hurt. But I mislabel that emotion, and then what happens is that the reaction now is misproportionate, because I am reacting to the label of being mad, and so I want to curse you out and tell you what a no good SOB you are because you rejected me.
Yeah.
And the truth is, you have the right to be self-directed, right? So if you don't want to be with me, then, I can be sad about that. That can be loss. I can grieve the fact that we're not in a relationship, but why being mad? And I think it's the
why
mislabeling.
Be mad is not the issue. I think sometimes I am mad that people don't like me. I'm mad because I want them to like me, and I feel like I'm a good person and a likable person, and if they don't like me, then there's something wrong with them. But it also makes me angry, because I work to present a pleasing demeanor to the world. I work to present an invitational demeanor to the world. And if I'm inviting and you're rejecting, then the hell with you. I get mad.
Well, okay, but
I get hurt, but it depends on how much importance I give you.
Right. Well, but isn't that really then very egocentric? If you say, "Oh, I'm inviting," and you reject me,
it is all egocentric, Michael. Everything we do is in service of the self.
Okay, and you don't believe that it is our job as human beings to try and view the reality of the world through the prism of other people? That should be something that we should strive to try and do?
I think it helps me understand and be more successful, so it's a skill I would like to develop. But I think I start with being narcissistic. I want what I want.
Well,
and I want people to like me.
I
want to have pleasant things in my life.
Yeah.
And if you don't let me have them, I want a nice car. If you've got a nice car, I might be jealous. So I don't know where jealousy falls in your 4-word spectrum, but it could make me sad. It could make me hurt. It could make me angry because you got something better than what I've got.
Well, so the where jealousy falls is that you're born with the 4 primary emotions. So your body's going to change hormonally no matter what you do. So you're going to have glad, mad, sad, and scared no matter what. To be able to be jealous, to be envious, to have all of those kinds of what are called secondary emotions, you have to develop what's called the differentiation of the self. So you have to recognize yourself as different. So that's the old experiment where they put rouge on the end of a baby's nose and put them in front of a mirror, and the point at which the child can look at themselves in the mirror and wipe the makeup off their nose. That's the point at which they recognize themselves as differentiated from the rest of the world. So you have to have that sense of differentiation of self to then develop those secondary emotions. If you never saw yourself as different or separate in the world, you would never be jealous.
Well, I saw a video on TikTok the other day. It was the cutest little thing. Maybe a 9-10-month-old baby in the sunlight, starting to crawl. Reaches his hand up and he sees the shadow. And he's playing with the shadow, and he puts his hand down, and he's playing with the shadow. He's intensely focused on the shadow.
Yeah.
And figuring out that if it's independent or if it's connected to him or what have you. And so before we started taping today, we were having a conversation about the ability...
Can I tell you what that's called?
Let me finish my thought.
Okay.
The ability of a child to harness all of his internal energies and focus them on perceiving and understanding the world. and that we think children today lose that, or that it's diminished or damaged in some way, because parents start feeding them electronic media as a way to entertain them and soothe them. So when you see a mother hand a baby her cell phone while she's in line at the checkout at the grocery store, so here, play with this, don't look around, don't see the candy that's for sale here and ask for it, don't see the people, don't pay attention to the world, pay attention to this little device. And the more that kids get subsumed into electronic media, the less creative, invested, aware they are in the world. And at some point, that begins to damage and limit them in ways that involve personal growth, expansion of self. So what word label were you going to teach me?
Piaget called those circular reactions. The way in which a child...
He was doing that with his hand, his shadow?
Well, so there's primary, secondary, and tertiary circular reactions, and they are different ways in which the child cognitively starts to recognize themselves as separate and an independent entity within a larger context. Yeah, and so the way that they learn where the boundaries are between them and their external world and how to categorize
it starts with their separation and individuation from the mom.
Yeah.
And their understanding that they are different from mom and that she is different from them. And then it begins to expand. At the same time as Noam Chomsky comes along and says the language acquisition device, the LAD, you begin to develop words and label. You start teaching a baby global words: animal, dog, cat, and everything they see is a dog. And you say, well, that's a dog. No, that's a cat. No, that's a squirrel. You teach them different ones, but you continue to give them modifiers. Yes, that's a dog. If it's a dog, it's a big dog. It's a little dog. It's a brown dog. It's a white dog. It's a collie dog. And you expand their vocabulary and teach them how to interact with and engage the world. And it's a critical growth structure.
Right.
But when you just hand them an iPad or a cell phone,
exactly,
and let them play some pre-purchased or exposed cartoon with whatever message that has in it, then that growth process is disrupted and limited. And then you develop children who in grade school are limited to being able to say, oh yeah, huh,
right,
and not be able to articulate anything that they're feeling or ask for anything that they need.
So let's take our break and we'll come back and we'll pick this up on the other side.
One of the reasons that I want to participate in this show is because it gives me an opportunity to clinically review my understanding of what therapy is and how it works, especially for the consumer. So my hope is that we will find conversations that broaden my understanding of that.
And my hope is that we do that in a way that is useful but also entertaining for people, so that they want to listen, not only because they're getting good psychology information, but because they just enjoy the show.
Easy listening with an informational twist.
So that's a new tagline.
They're not sitting there going, huh?
Easy listening with an informational twist.
I'm really good at this. I'm a professional.
You're a professional. If it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Okay, we're back, and absolutely, I think that is, for me, the essential point that I wanted to make about this whole example is this idea that we have significantly, over the last 40 or 50 years, since the advent of radio and television, electronic means of being able to distract ourselves, we've changed the way in which we learn how to self-soothe and be able to accommodate those emotional states in our own bodies. You know, I was telling you that the Children's Television Workshop, when they started doing their work on being able to hold the attention of children, and they learned that attention spans were different, whether you were talking about a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, or a 7-year-old, that was great work. But it was almost too successful because we all became very comfortable setting our infants in front of the TV and letting that act as an electronic babysitter, and now we have so many different screens to be able to do that, and it stops. You had a great story about going outside and just watching ants march in a line. And but doing that in nature and being outdoors and smelling the fresh air. Yeah.
In the experience.
And now we watch that on an iPad, an animated set of ants going and doing that, but it changes the experience. And I think that what we've taught ourselves is that the only way that we can soothe is when we have the electronic media with us. And then when you don't know how to soothe, you become one of these moms. Somebody cuts you off in traffic and you're going to go blow them away in the drop-off line of school.
Yeah. Or if you get so invested in self-soothing through the use of electronic media, what happens when the electricity's cut off? If there's a storm and you can't turn on the internet, you can't get the most immediate, up-to-date moment of contact with the outside world. So then what do you do with your own feelings? What do you do with yourself? Are you afraid? Are you sad? Are you alone? Are you angry? If you don't know how to handle those emotions or experience those situations, it's problematic. It's problematic for you. It's problematic for your relationships. If you're a parent, it's problematic for your children. I mean, how many parents have been abusive of little children over the last year and a half because of the pandemic, requiring everybody to stay home, especially in high-rise apartment buildings in big cities? You can't get out. You can't go play. You can't run and jump. You're locked into 800 square feet of space with 2 or 3 other people, and you don't have any privacy. There's always noise. There's always something. And as a psychologist or counselor, we've had conversations with people about how do I spend my time with my kids to keep them killing them, keep them hurting them? How do I engage them and occupy them? How do I burn their energy or direct it and focus it for growth? How do I do this trapped in this space with these little people?
And I think that becomes even more dire or more complex when you think that the parent may be in that same space but maybe trying to work remotely.
Yeah.
If you had unlimited time and attention to be able to focus on those children, I think that's a different answer than I would say, go and spend time with them, get down on the floor with them and interact with them, and that will redirect their attention.
Teach them to bake cookies, teach them to cook dinner, teach them to plan a menu, teach them to work a puzzle.
But if you're trying to be on Zoom for 12 hours a day, and you're expecting your children to be able to play in a way or to be able to direct their own attention in a way that doesn't interrupt your workday, that's completely unrealistic. There is no solution to that conundrum because that's an unsolvable problem.
But my point was that sometimes leads to abuse of the child.
Absolutely.
By the parent, because the parent's not regulating their own emotions and doesn't know how. They're overwhelmed. And
I would also point out that you don't have to become violently aggressive for it to be abuse. You can abuse a child by neglecting it.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you 100% that the levels of negative interaction that have been experienced by children over the course of the pandemic has been exponentially greater than before the pandemic. But let's go back to, or let's go in a direction of, so then how do we encourage people to soothe themselves and be able to display that to their child?
Well, I see this whole conversation on multiple levels. One is talking about how the two women or two adults can regulate their emotions and engage with one another even in a moment of distress. The other one is how society systemically requires people to behave or teaches people to behave. And the third level is what does society allow in terms of weaponizing your body, weaponizing your environment? Because do we want people who have short attention spans and limited emotional regulation to have access to deadly weapons? If I get mad enough in a moment of road rage, what if I pull my gun out and shoot you in the car in the next lane because you cut me off or you did something I didn't like or I don't like the kind of car you drive? I mean, we live in St. Louis, Missouri area. There are every single day of the week news stories about people getting shot driving on the highways around St. Louis, just driving in their car and getting shot by somebody for something. So we have a personal individual, we have a psychological, we have a social issue, multiple social issues. How do we resolve these problems? How do we limit this and calm down some of the rage and fear that exists societally right now that disparate elements are engaged in promoting on both sides of the spectrum, left or right? The political sphere with its agendas, it's all or nothing. My issue or the highway. My issue is abortion. The only thing I'm ever going to vote for is the candidate says he's opposed to abortion. I don't care whether it's taxes, whether it's water supply, whether it's health care, whether it's wearing a mask, school, education. As long as you're right on abortion, I'll vote for you. No matter what, if you're a despicable human being, I'll vote for you if you're right on abortion. Then you got somebody else that says, well, no, that's not my issue. My issue is taxation. My issue is something else. We're being acculturated by the media systems to become single issue people. And that's a comprehensive mistake on the part of our culture.
Well, obviously I would agree with that 100%. But I think that even something that extreme boils down to the solution being, how do people learn to be able to soothe their own emotions, to be able to take a breath and be able to take a minute and consider possible different responses to a given situation?
Yes, I agree with you 1,000%. But we live in a society, and we live in a society where there are elements that progressively promote disruption and anger and distress. And how do we avoid that? How do we contain that? How do we limit that?
Well, I don't know if there is a way.
There has to become one.
And I don't know if there's a way to reach the people who are going to feed on that message. But there may be people out there who want for themselves to know how they can control their own responsiveness. And if you get enough people in that group, then you could actually make a systemic change. So what would you say to somebody that said, Brett, tell me how I can control my own reactions in a way that gives me the opportunity to think just for a second and possibly consider alternatives to pulling out my gun and going and confronting this person?
That's the Albert Schweitzer example. Albert Schweitzer said it's better to light a single candle than to curse the darkness. So it all boils down to personal choice and personal behavior. So what I would say in response to that is you've got to think. You've got to teach yourself to stop. I remember when I was a kid growing up, talking about cartoons and the impact they have on your lifetime. There was a cartoon character called Leghorn, Foghorn, Leghorn.
Foghorn, Leghorn.
Big Chicken.
Big Chicken.
And in the cartoon, trying to teach children to
manage. A little bit of a stutter.
What?
Foghorn Leghorn stuttered. He about said.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm a big Foghorn Leghorn fan, actually.
So one of the lessons he attempted to teach children is to count to 10 before you react. But when he was really distressed or it was really an emergent situation, he'd count by twos, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And the stripes of red that would fill his body as he was angry, it'd be a red stripe, a white stripe, a red stripe, a white. So he'd become striped. And as a child, it's a visual lesson about how anger can suffuse the body and how if you're counting, you can slow that process down. But if you count by twos, it messes it up.
Right.
But the point being, you have to stop. You have to compose yourself. You have to take a breath. You have to think before you react. And then if you can teach yourself to pause and reflect, then you can steer your thinking into behaviors that, like meditation, that or deep breathing, that can affect your physiology and your perspective. So that's what I would answer.
And I would add to that I would not want people to underestimate the value or the effectiveness of just learning how to take that first breath. You know, if this is something that you are struggling with, just give yourself the opportunity to take that first deep breath and then reevaluate where you're at, and eventually, yes, learn how to do deep breathing as an exercise, learn how to do meditation. But initially, just taking that first deep breath, the reason people say breathe, and there's all kinds of biology about why that works that we could get into, that I would love to get into, but I'm not going to do that today. But that works. It does work. And if you don't know how to do it, if you've never practiced it, then yeah, that's the first thing, is just giving yourself permission to take that first deep breath.
Well, and sometimes it's not you. Sometimes it's somebody that you trust. When I was in therapy, and I would hit a place where I was emotionally devastated, and I was flooded and locked up. And my therapist, and it has to be someone that you trust, my therapist, non-judgmentally, non-critically, would just say softly, I need you to breathe. Take a breath. Take a breath. Take a slow breath. Just breathe. Just breathe. And I could hear it, and I could do it. And that helped walk me back off the cliff.
And I think that that's a great place for us to wrap. That's what your job as a parent is.
Yeah.
Is to be that person for your child.
Until you internalize and be the co-parent and learn to do it for yourself.
Right.
Those who are watching the video may have seen me do that when you interrupted me about foghorn leghorn. And I just breathed.
I really honestly thought that I was adding something to the conversation.
I'm sure you did. I'm sure you were. And I don't question that. But I had a reaction to it that didn't devolve into slapping you right upside the head, as I should have done.
I think that undermines the message of the podcast.
Oh, well.
But I'm glad you didn't have a gun.
Yeah, there you go. See? We're making progress.
All right. So the music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. We always encourage people to go onto the YouTubes and find us by searching Psych with Mike and subscribe to the show. That is super beneficial for us. And if you have any questions or comments, suggestions that you would like to make about things you would like to hear us talk about, you can get us at psychwithmike.com. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.